What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1, going through episodes 1 through 4, which are out now on Netflix. The fifth and final season of Stranger Things has a segmented release, with Volume 1, these first 4 episodes, being released this past Thanksgiving Eve. The next 3 episodes will be released on Christmas Day, and then the finale episode will be released on New Year's Eve, and that episode actually will be in some movie theaters as well. And of course, Stranger Things has taken an age to return to our screens. Of course, Season 4 was released in May of 2022. This over 3-year delay, yes, it was affected by the strikes, but it's also affected by the increasing size of the series cast and their various scheduling needs as they get more famous and more well-known, and the fact that the show has continued to increase in size and scope, and of course, leading to a larger and larger post-production. Stranger Things 1 through 5 only take place over 4 years in the world of the show throughout the 1980s, of course, but if you think about when Stranger Things was first casting for season 1, the core kids that make up the Hellfire Club on this show have been affiliated with this series for over half their lives at this point. And ultimately, I think people are looking forward to Stranger Things wrapping up, given how long it's been and what we expect from some members of this cast moving forward. And before we jump into Volume 1 itself, I think it's really worth considering how far we've come with all this, with the creators of the series, the Duffer Brothers, announcing officially that they will be leaving Netflix for a pact with Paramount. Millie Bobby Brown is now a married adoptive mother. Joe Keery now has a song with almost 2 billion streams on Spotify. Finn Wolfhard is directing movies in addition to continuing to act. Sadie Sink is playing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet on the West End any day now. We've come a long way with all these people. But there's also something to be said for what Stranger Things has been and what it was, the original blockbuster Netflix franchise, right? And I think you take this and Squid Game and they kind of volleyed back and forth between what's been the biggest series for Netflix overall. I think now Stranger Things Season 5, it'll probably take that mantle once again. On the other hand, it seems like Squid Game might have more of a life post its original story than, say, Stranger Things does, which has seemingly been so indebted to its core cast. Time will tell with that. But nevertheless, we're back with the first 4 episodes of this final 8-episode season. Much like Season 4, these are long episodes, all an hour or more in length. What I like most about Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 1 is that these first 4 episodes have a lot tighter of focus than Stranger Things has had in its past. This show has unfortunately continued to only grow its ensemble. There are so many characters on this show, and for the most part, they're all rowing in the same direction in Season 5, all working towards that same goal. Having this much overlapping plot, even with character groups going on side quests, really helps this story stay on the tracks. Unfortunately, the Stranger Things continues to add even more characters to the mix with Season 5, and it's essentially doing the same thing as when it first started, taking new preteen characters and foregrounding them into the arch of the story, because the main characters of the show are now being played by people in their 20s. I didn't really need Holly Wheeler to become that big of a character with Season 5. It feels kind of contrived. But for the characters that we actually do care about, I think there's been some good moments thus far. But time will tell if Netflix and the Duffers will actually land this plane. We pick up with Season 5. It's been, I believe, a year since Season 4 ended, and we're now in November of 1987. Robin and Steve are now radio DJs, and they are kind of doing a pirate radio thing where they're communicating in code to their various crewmates as things happen. The cliffhanger that ended with Season 4, where Vecna opened up the maw of the earth and Upside Down was leaching out into Hawkins, into the real world, that was promptly completely written off at the start of Season 5. The military has come in and quarantined Hawkins and kind of bolted up all these openings except for one, which now exists as a portal into the Upside Down for the military to do their thing, do their research, do their investigating and all that. Of course, Matthew Modine's character is no more. In his place, we now have Linda Hamilton, another 80s icon, joining the cast, very similar to how Sean Astin came to the show. And we learn that under her leadership, there's actually a full-on military base constructed in the Upside Down, where the people are there at all times. And I think this leads to a lot of perhaps interesting lore developments. That being said, we're spending a lot of time in the Upside Down through these 4 episodes, and I don't think visually it's the most interesting. I think the Upside Down has never really been that compelling of a visual palette. It's always been pretty flat to me just because it's obviously so digital. I much prefer the action that takes place back on Earth, back in Hawkins, where like the Demogorgons are fighting people, fighting the military, fighting our cast, fighting them in the streets, in the woods, whatever. Like I think that just looks a lot better. It's pretty clear, though, early on, the various groups that you have with the cast. I mean, David Harbour and Millie Bobby Brown interface with the greater ensemble very little in these first 4 episodes. Speaks a lot to, I think, the general scheduling challenges of keeping a cast this big together and trying to make it all work for a TV show, given how long that shoot takes. But as a result, Eleven and Hop are kind of doing their own training thing as they do these various burns, these various runs into the Upside Down, trying to find Vecna, trying to end this once and for all, as it were. Oh, sorry, no. Burns is what the military does their operations. And then when they do that, our crew does these crawls, they call them, and they use I think some pretty amusing radio frequency type geolocating at the hand of Steve Carrington behind the wheel, and Dustin behind the radio knob, and Jonathan as well. I think that's kind of a cool thing, the way they do that, where they're driving over the mirror image of the Upside Down from back on Earth. I think that leads to some pretty cool stuff. And I thought episode 1 was probably the strongest of this whole batch. It felt like a really great, like, getting back in the swing of the whole cast here. Dustin mourning Eddie a lot still in that first episode, which I liked quite a bit. R.I.P. Joseph Quinn's character here. The best stuff, though, is when the series actually gets focused. They understand Vecna's plan to basically bring in and kidnap all these other kids. Basically, Will Byers was the first, and now he's going after the rest of the Hawkins kids one by one. And even though, as a result, that introduces a lot of other characters that you don't really feel like you need to spend time with, right? I mean, Holly Wheeler, Mike's sister, young sister, and then Derek, who's pretty funny, honestly, dipshit Derek as they call him. I thought Derek was really amusing overall, but just like it's a lot more like adding on, I guess, right? Of course, Lucas's sister was added to this cast, last season or the season before. I don't even remember. We just keep adding and adding. We don't subtract, and I did feel like they did a pretty big cop out in episode 2 or 3 at the end there, where the Byers family gets attacked when Holly gets taken, and as a result, both Mr. and Mrs. Byers get absolutely wrecked by a Demogorgon. They get their torso slashed, right? But neither one dies. One's in a coma, one's in surgery and recovering. They're both in the hospital. And I was about to kind of applaud the series for taking that swing and actually taking someone off the board, something this show has never really done before, right? Apart from Max's brother, Dacre Montgomery's character, and Eddie, Joseph Quinn's character, we haven't really lost anyone on this show. That was a good guy. Sean Astin, I guess, comes to mind as well. I thought that would be pretty interesting and pretty bold to kill the Wheeler parents. The fact that neither one of them is gonna go out, I thought was kind of spineless, honestly. Episode 4 gives us probably the biggest extended action sequence that Stranger Things has had. I know we had a lot of action in season 4, but this extended sequence at the military base where various Demogorgons attack and basically wipe out the entire military force that had been there, with Vecna himself showing up with like new decked out armor by the look of it and wrecking shop, taking all the kids. The good guy's plan has failed in the end. That was a pretty extended action set piece, right? With all the various gunfire and moving around. It's pretty kinetic. Definitely the most movement that you'd seen with something like that. That wasn't like a car chase or something, right? I thought that was pretty cool. And I think actually the secret plan that the good guys have to sneak into the military base from underground and how that was going with Derek's subterfuge and things like that. I really liked all that. Again, most of the cast is working together with the same goal with all that. And then, of course, it ends with a temporary cliffhanger for Volume 1 here, where Will Byers, Noah Schnapp's character, is able to finally come to grips with who he is, and it's very much paralleled with his understanding of his homosexuality that's been a part of the show from at least season 2, right? But paralleling that with also understanding that he's still connected to Vecna, and they realized last season that there's a hive mind of how things are communicated, and a shared pain and a shared brain and all of that. And now he's able to kind of harness his abilities and turn the tide and take it to Vecna, right? And that's where it ends. And pretty telegraphed that it was going to go that way. It does kind of feel satisfying, even if, on the other hand, I would say there's seemingly like less and less stakes, like character to character, with all this. I think, the Robin Will stuff, because Robin, of course, is the only gay character that Will knows in this world, and he only knows that because he accidentally snuck up on her and saw her kissing her girlfriend at the hospital. They have some sweet conversations, even if it's all kind of high and mighty platitudes. That's kind of nice, and I like that. I like the parallel they did to kind of lead Will to accept who he is and actually be able to use that power to harness these abilities he never asked for. Right, all pretty good. I think Steve Harrington on the show, pretty one note this season. Jonathan, Nancy, not a lot to do. Lucas, not a lot to do. Mike. Definitely feels like a more mature character this time around. It certainly helps that Finn Wolfhard clearly looks older than he used to when the show began. He looks like a young man, given his age, but the conversations he has with his sister before she gets taken, I think that level of emotional maturity was something we hadn't previously received from Mike in the past, when he was a perhaps unspectacular lead character on the show from time to time. Felt like he's come a long way with this. And of course, the other big thing, and probably the biggest, subplot side story, is everything that's happened with Max, Sadie Sink's character, who seemingly was completely blind at the end of the previous season, still in a coma in the hospital. Lucas visits her at one point playing that Kate Bush song that, of course, went completely viral off the strength of season 4 3 years ago. But then we understand where Sadie Sink is in this upside down world of Vecna. And Holly had been taken there as well, and we assume all the other kids that he's taking will be brought there as well for whatever his new plan is. And Max kind of being there as this guerrilla underground rebel figure who can't escape her trappings, but is also kind of resisting what's going on. That was pretty cool, and it remains to be seen what will become of that story, because again, I'm not super invested in any other new kids. I'll be curious how long that stays that way. How long will Sadie Sink not actually be on the show with anyone else in the main cast? We have no idea, but time will tell. I think if there's anyone you could bet on not making it out of this season alive, it was so referenced throughout this volume 1. It didn't happen yet, but it feels like David Harbour's hop is not long for this show. Some sacrifice will be made. It does feel, though, like one of the core crew, right? Dustin, Lucas, Will, Mike, one of them, and then also one of the older crew, Robin, Nancy, Steve, Jonathan. You feel like you got to lose one of both to give this show a little bit of weight at the end, but I'm not really banking on it, given how they treated the Wheeler family. So we'll see. Not that I need Stranger Things to be Game of Thrones, and kill off all its characters. Not what I'm asking for. It's just like there's a certain implausibility to the way things have gone plot-wise over the years, and it's not a show that strives away from violence, right? There's tons of violence. There's tons of PG-13 level gore on this show, right? It's dark. It's bleak at times. It certainly ends in a bleak way just for Volume 1, despite Will's new powers. So you got to feel you got to make good on that in some way, right? I think Millie Bobby Brown's 11 feels very safe, given that Millie Bobby Brown is like one of the biggest stars on Netflix from her other work, right? With Enola Holmes and Damsel and The Electric State. She's a face of Netflix, right? Pretty sure Netflix would have given some notes if the Duffers had actually wanted to get rid of 11. So I don't expect that to happen. Everything else, though, feels on the table. I feel like Steve Harrington is probably the best bet, given that Steve Harrington only survived season 1 because everyone loved Joe Keery so much, and then his character became so popular that he got turned from a villain into a good guy and part of the crew. Maybe they'll complete that circle. I'm not sure. But we know the next 3 episodes will be arriving on Christmas Day, and that finale will be airing on New Year's Eve. I do appreciate Netflix spreading out the release. Of course, part of this is just to spread around subscriber churn so people stay subscribed for at least 2 months if they love the show but don't watch anything else on Netflix. That's part of it, but I also like that it extends the conversation. Everything we talk about with week-to-week shows on like HBO and everywhere else. So it's better than nothing. It's better than a full season binge drop, that's for sure. Let me know, though, how are you feeling about Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1? What are you most looking forward to seeing with the series conclusion? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.